Welcome our viewers. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Andrew Decohort. Here on Uga Media, we promote peace, democracy, conversations, and nonviolent way of doing things. And for that, we have Dr. Andrew. Dr. Andrew holds a doctorate in religious and political ethics from University of Chicago. He has taught ethics, public theology, and Ethiopian studies at Wheaton College, the Ethiopian Graduate School of Theology, and the University of Bonn. He is the author of the forthcoming Why Pray? 7 Practices of Flourishing on the Edge of Faith. However, having said that, I would like Dr. Andrew he's a founder of a movement called the Neighbor Love Movement, or Balinjeraye, or Olla.
Or Jokaiga.
Jokaiga. Okay. Yeah. The name used to be, I used to see this name on Facebook. It was not Neighbor Love the first time. It used to be a neighborhood. I don't know. It's slightly different, I think. I'll give you a chance to explain about the movement. Then we will continue discussing about other issues.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Nagasa, thank you for inviting me onto this conversation. I'm grateful for the chance to dialogue with you. The Neighbor Love Movement is committed to seeing and treating others as neighbors. What that means for us is seeing the worth of people who are different than us and moving closer to understand, to share empathy, and to commit to a shared society. And so the Neighbor Love Movement asks this question: how do we see others? Do I see you as a stranger? Do I see you as an enemy? Do I see you as a competitor? Or do I see you as a fellow human being who has precious value and who deserves my respect, my truthfulness, my care? And the Neighbor Love Movement is working to encourage young people to see the other as a neighbor, someone who is connected with deep value, and so to build together a society of trust, dignity, cooperation, innovation, and human flourishing.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Andrew. So
Please call me Andrew.
Okay. Quickly, how did this idea come to you to establish this? And what's your exposure with, how did you come to know about Ethiopia? Because work a lot of things in this regard.
Yeah. So I came to Ethiopia for the first time in 2004. At the time, I was a university student, and I did an internship in Addis, in Finfinne, at an institution called the Mercy Center. It was with impoverished women and children. There was a food program. There was an educational program for the youth. So I was an intern there, and I fell in love with Ethiopian people. I got to travel outside the city a bit and learn about the richness and complexity of Ethiopian histories and cultures. I got to experience the kindness and warmth of Ethiopian people. I also got to see some of the needs that touched my heart, like poverty, conflict, the importance of education for human development. And so this kind of intersection of people, history, and culture, and then public life and education really touched my heart. And the Neighbor Love Movement, and I guess I really got started through an encounter that I had in Dredoa in 2018. I was invited by City Hall in Dredoa to come speak to a group of about 200 youth. At the time, there was significant conflict in the region, especially around Jijiga, where there was people going door to door and warning minorities that they needed to leave or that they would be punished. And so when I arrived in Dredwa, there were these camps with tents of displaced people. And so when I spoke to the youth in City Hall that day, I spoke about why we should love our enemy. And after that talk, a young woman named Ferdosa came up to me and she said, Dr. Andrew, I have never been told to love my enemy before. And starting today, I will love my enemy and I will teach others to love my enemy. And it was a kind of light bulb moment for me to say there are other Ferdosas all throughout Ethiopia who are looking for an invitation to a different way of seeing and treating other people in situations of very serious conflict. And what they're looking for is that invitation and that inspiration to break out of the othering mindset that says those people are our enemy. We need to attack them in order to be safe ourselves. Instead, we can cultivate a mutual flourishing in which your safety is also part of my safety. And my dignity is also part of your dignity. So Ferdosa, the encounter with Ferdosa was an important moment. And I guess another important moment was the lynching of the man, that we all saw, that horrifying image of the man hanging upside down from the traffic light. And then the image that we saw of a woman burning a man alive in Hawassa. These were also images that helped indicate that the problem of othering was becoming very severe. It was causing displacement of communities. It was causing these public executions, and it was driving Ethiopia towards civil war. And that's what we see today. And so we wanted to work to say, let's change our vision of how we see the other, no longer as a competitor, no longer as someone to be eliminated, but someone to be understood and cared about, and to develop a relationship.
Okay, good. Just I see this area. We have a lot of problem in this regard. Mostly there is this culture of we need a uniform kind of thinking. Unless you have that uniform kind of thinking, we don't tolerate. I mean, there is a group way of thinking, and then there is minority tyranny. If some group or some people, few people, think a different way, then there is othering, and there is this concept of enemy all here and there. And I also found that you don't like the term enemy. There is no enemy.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you explain. I was watching a video posted on YouTube on I even shared it. So what do you make of enemy?
Yes, it's a fundamental question. We have seen the proliferation of enemy images and enemy language in Ethiopia today. I think at root, enemy means the one you feel entitled to hate. In English, you can hear the shared root of enemy and enmity. They come from the same word and they really mean hate. The enemy is the one that you are entitled, or you feel like you're entitled to hate.
To hate, even do more.
Well, what I would say is that
Yeah.
hate is the desire for the other not to exist.
Yep.
So hate becomes a kind of homicidal emotion that is moving towards conflict. It's moving towards violence. Ultimately, hate is the root of genocide, because it's saying these people should not exist. They need to be eliminated in order for us to be safe, to experience dignity, to have the kind of life that we want to have. And so I would say we need to acknowledge that there's real conflict between people. We shouldn't pretend like everything is fine. That's the kind of false ideology of the prosperity gospel that, well, just everything is fine, so let's not acknowledge the problems. But I would not say that I have enemies in the sense that there are people that I feel entitled to hate. And I guess I've gotten so many death threats from people. I've gotten so many degrading, insulting, humiliating comments from people. But I don't feel entitled to hate these people because I believe that they still have value. And I believe that if we could actually connect, that we'd find that we have a lot in common, that we have shared fears, that we have shared hopes, that we have shared desires for our future.
Yeah, truly speaking, as you said, that's not only you. Maybe I received thousands and uh, thousands since 2020 to
Yeah.
now. I sometimes do look at my spam and all that, and
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and you see people threatening to kill you, and but what is this expression of hate? How uh, what are these hate? Now everybody will tell you, oh, hate is not good.
Right, right.
But how is it expressed? Like, how do we, uh, what things do you call hate? Hatred.
Yeah.
Like,
I think a lot of times hate comes out of fear.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
There's a need to look below the surface and really understand hate carefully, because hate usually expresses itself as confidence, as aggression, as
mm-hmm,
loud words. Um, but I think that's the false face of hate.
uh-huh,
Under the surface, there's a deep fear in hate that says, I'm afraid of you. If
uh-huh,
your voice is heard, my voice won't. If
uh-huh,
you're full, mine will be empty. If your freedom is protected, then I will experience loss or oppression. And so hate responds with these very aggressive, insulting, life threatening words and behavior. But I think at heart, it's a deep insecurity. Sometimes there's a deep inferiority. And the way it responds is by saying, let me try to either silence you, to get you to silence yourself, or to physically eliminate you. And that can be through imprisonment, that can be through displacement, that can be through killing. So I think at heart, fear is really playing a big role in hate, and hate expresses itself in these kind of false signs of confidence, of dictation, of aggression, and this is why I really think we need to heal hate, because we're always at our worst when we're afraid. We're least creative when we are afraid. And human beings have been given the gift of creativity to not just recreate the past and to replay what has already been done. Human beings can move into new futures. But in order to do that, we have to move out of the mindset of fear, move out of the mindset of hate, into the creative mindset of dialogue, of honesty, to say, hey, Nagasa, I'm afraid of you. I think that if you have freedom, my freedom's going to suffer. I think that if you have more food, I'm going to have less. And for you to respond with the same vulnerability and honesty to say, Andrew, I also feel that way. And for us to say, how can we work towards a shared future where you're safe, where we're both free, where we're both taken care of in our basic needs? That's when we can become creative instead of replaying the past. So we have to confront the fear that is hidden underneath the hate, and that requires vulnerability, Nagasa, and that requires a lot of courage.
yeah, I see one comment saying that Nagesa Dube is prosperity party puppet and parasite of for Oromo in particular. So here is one of the mentality is Nagesa Dube. I never say down Abi. I never said I never like participate in any protest movement, especially after Abi came to power, and
Okay.
I had a position when I went to Ethiopia, which I resigned, and then because I I don't fiercely oppose, then the mentality is, so I am supporter. I actually declared freely that I have a third way, not like a oppose or like support, and I want to do things in a different way. So this is what I briefly expressed in Uga Media. So here what I see is I want to engage with people, with anybody. Those who oppose extremely, maybe even those who engage in rebel fighting.
Sure.
People in the government. I want to engage with all of them. I think that solution comes only with coming to discussion. Most of these people would tell you government should talk, they don't talk to me, but they say,
right,
those who live in America, United States, they don't talk to each other.
Yeah.
It's for them, it's better to discriminate, better to like ostracize people who think support the government. The government people also give some name to those who oppose them. They either say these are puppets of TPLF, these are this and that, and then push them aside.
Right.
Those who oppose do the same.
Yep. Everybody's mirroring each other.
Yes, yes. And then for this person now, saying Nagesa is puppet of prosperity is enough to do whatever against me.
Right.
Just don't talk to Nagesa. Don't discuss with him because he's a supporter of Prosperity Party. That's enough. That's enough for him. He is righteous because he opposed the Prosperity Party. He is correct. He is on the right track. And anybody who he thinks support opposition, that's the evil. And anybody who supports that evil is an evil. And now by that, he justifies himself as a right person, is a perfect person. But that's not true. That's not true. That's not how democracy works. That's not how world works. You see?
Right.
But I see problem in both sides.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Because why I say this is we have opposed some region. Even before us, people opposed the Derg. They overthrew Derg.
Yeah.
Democracy, equality, freedom, liberty we didn't achieve that.
Right.
Another form of Derg came to power. Another dictatorship came to power. And we opposed, I was in the movement, we were leading the protest movement, I mean, at least ideally, against the TPLF hegemony. That group is deposed, but we didn't achieve democracy yet. I mean, things didn't go perfect. And overthrowing Abiy or Prosperity Party doesn't bring democracy to Ethiopia.
Right.
The idea should be there even before that.
Yes.
So I see another dictatorship coming, even if this one is removed, because I mean, you understand from the way people think. You understand from the mentality. You understand the way they manage their organizations. You see?
Totally.
Yeah, so it's very important to create this culture of, discussion, brainstorming, debate. I think it's your stage, but I started to lecture. Let me get back to my questions.
Could I comment on that real quick?
Yeah, please.
Friedrich Nietzsche is one of my favorite philosophers. I think we have a lot to learn from him.
Yeah.
He said, do not become a monster in order to defeat a monster.
Yeah.
Do not become a monster in order to defeat a monster. I think what Nietzsche meant is this. We all feel the temptation to become the thing we hate in order to defeat the thing that we hate. And so we're tired of dictatorship, but we think that the only way to overcome that is through another dictatorship. We're tired of being discriminated against, marginalized, inferiorized, and then we feel like the only way to be safe is to marginalize, otherize other people. We're tired of being generalized. We say, no, I'm a complex individual. My community has complexity. There's diversity within our group. And then we turn that around and say, well, all Amharas are like this, or all Tagaru are like this, or all Oromos are like this, or all Gumus or Walaita or Sidama. We could go on and on. We begin to repeat the thing that we hate in order to try to defeat it. And of course, this is a self-defeating strategy. All it does is entrench the old pattern that we're trying to heal. Now, I think that this is a clear pattern of trauma.
Yeah, I see. I experienced a perfect representation of what I read in Paulo Freire.
Yeah.
What was it? The
Pedagogy Expressed.
Yeah, the pedagogy of them. In there, you find the oppressed struggles to become oppressor. I mean, that is a vicious circle. What exactly I experienced in Ethiopia. Actually, it's before 2018 that I got a chance to read the book, and it really enlightened my vision. Thank you to Ashagre, who recommended me to read the book. Ashagre lives in Washington, D.C. area, in the DMV area. He recommended me 2 books, and one of the books is the Pedagogy of the Oppressed. It really enlightened me, and I see Ethiopia is in that vicious circle. Every group that works towards opposing the group in power is deemed to be the same group after they took power.
Yeah.
I mean, they are different people, but with the same mentality, because even during the way why they fight is to win that group, but to do the same thing, almost the same modus operandi continues. So we're experiencing this. Anyways, we keep on discussing this issue, but let me, I read in your article on a foreign policy entitled Christian Nationalism is Tearing Ethiopia Apart. You mentioned Prime Minister Abiy's about his speech against Tigray as enemies, as cancer, weed. And some people believe that that the war in Tigray is a war against the people of Tigray. I mean, even some are like, some call it a genocidal war. How do you describe this conflict? Because there is another version. I have my own understanding, for example, and there is another. The government, the federal government, call it operation to bring some officials to court.
Mm-hmm.
And then that operation didn't work that way. It became federal government against one regional state conflict war. Just what do you make of this conflict? Because there is a lot of controversy, debate around this.
Right. The first thing I'd say, Nagasa, is we need to embrace complexity. Complexity means that there aren't simple answers and explanations. It means that we need to tolerate ambiguity, multiple perspectives, the willingness to listen. These are the prerequisites of dialogue. I always think of a sharuba, a braid, when I think about complexity. Complexity means that there's multiple things that are woven together. In order to have a clear understanding, we need to begin to take these apart, look at them one by one with a lot of patience.
Yeah, there is no simple answer.
Yeah, a lot of gentleness. Mm-hmm. So we need to begin with complexity and a willingness to listen. Now, that's really hard because right now, Ethiopia is a bit like a trauma center where everyone is throbbing with pain and everyone wants their voice to be heard. And so listening becomes very difficult that high intensity, high stress, high conflict environment. I want to acknowledge that. Let me say a few other things. First, as I said, there has been a proliferation of othering inside of Ethiopia for many years, and we have seen the use of this language be mass mobilized by Prime Minister Abiy. The cancer, weed, hyena, enemy, demon, monster. I'm an ethicist. I study the history of ethics. We know where this goes. When we begin seeing the other person as less than human, it leads to aggression and the attempt to eliminate the other. This leads to mass insecurity and conflict, and this can spiral into genocidal violence that we saw in Nazi Germany or in Rwanda or in Serbia, Bosnia, in other contexts. So that's the main thing. But this war has really exposed the radioactive power of othering in Ethiopia and how it can be mobilized for the mass destruction of life. So in Tigray today, in Amhara, in Afar, in Benishangul, of course in Oromia, we are seeing the massive loss of life. We're seeing massive displacement. We're seeing mass hunger, especially in Tigray. I hope everyone will have the humility and the courage to watch the Art TV documentary about Tigray, in which footage that was taken from this summer shows people starving to death. It shows doctors inside of hospitals who are weeping because there is no medicine to give people who are coming for care. This is the catastrophic emergency that is facing thousands and millions of people, especially in Tigray, but also in Oromia.
Andrew,
Also,
I there is no question about suffering of the people. I mean, it's sad.
Yep.
It's really sad, and there are those kind of suffering in other areas too. But the Tigray suffering is the worst.
Yes,
I am talking about the cause of what that is. The conflict is a cause, and
so let me try to.
Yeah.
I do think that othering is the cause, but it's hunger for power. Hunger for power is the cause of this war, and there's competing visions about how power can be achieved. One is through a unitarist vision in which Ethiopia is a single entity with proud history that should fundamentally remain unchanged. These are people who rail against ethnic federalism, who say that the constitution that currently governs Ethiopia is the cause of all of Ethiopia's problems. On the other hand, there are different paradigms of how power should be secured for people who have experienced historic marginalization and oppression. But at the root, we're seeing different groups trying to achieve power, which always leads to suffering.
I have to interfere here. You mentioned, I do agree that it's a power. It's power. But I put this both sides. For example, my understanding is the TPLF was pushed away from power, from the federal power, and then they resented about that. That disappointment caused, and further there is a bringing them to court, to detaining them and the officials, and that they feel that most of them are going to be taken to prison, being humiliated, and their organization is going to vanish. And I think that is why they went to war. On my understanding, they didn't want to face that. For that, they preached to the people of Tigray, we have done no wrong. It's just because we're Tigray, they hate us. So that's a preach on that side. That is in 2005, I was in prison. I remember during that election, there is a massive voting for opposition.
Yep.
2-3 days after election, Meles was asked when people say it's because you guys did this wrong and that wrong, and your officials in different places didn't do good. He said, I don't think so. I don't think so. He said the intention, it means, no, it's because we're from Tigray that they don't vote for us. I mean, it's a kind of tribalism here, or the Oromos and the Amaras and all that. There is, yeah.
We can try to unravel the onion of the history here, but what I'd like to point out is, again, this pattern of mirroring, how groups that are against one another end up looking like one another. So on the one hand, one group says, we are innocent. We have done good. We have had good intentions, and we have achieved good results. We should be praised and protected.
Yes.
Then this group has evil intentions, has sought to destroy the community, and they should be eliminated. But you go and talk to this group and they'll say the same thing. We have done good. We are innocent. We're victims. We've suffered. This group has evil intentions. They want to destroy us. In order for us to be safe, we need to take them down. And what I want to say, we all need to look in the mirror.
Yeah, both groups will tell you.
Start with ourselves.
Exactly opposite. Yes.
I start with Andrew.
Yep, I agree, Andrew. But my point is here. So my point is, I have heard this and I have read a lot of articles about how Ethiopia, the other group, for example, the group in power is unitary. I have been there. I have seen the political program of Prosperity Party. I have been there maybe 5 months, but I have never come across any intention to unitarize Ethiopia. Actually, the group in power praises Ethiopia, just like previous, like Derg, or like there is this Ethiopianism, praised, unity praised, but I don't see, the regions are there. Nothing has been done to the constitution. But right away on the formation of Prosperity Party, a lot of advocates who oppose this government right away declared that these people is going to be merging political parties into unitary party doesn't make the parties can be formed whatever way like. They can make fronts, they can be alliance, or they can merge into one party. That doesn't mean the country is going unitary. I don't see that. And having some maybe Amhara or people who with that mentality in the government also doesn't mean. I don't see that. I didn't find out that. But there is this narrative going on saying that there is a conflict of ideology. This is a unitarist, and the group in Tigray is federalist.
Mm-hmm.
I see my colleagues, my Oromo colleagues, many of them, they framed this narrative and saying that this is a unitarist camp of Dr. Abiy and other. Is it just because the Amhara and Oromo allied there becomes unitarist, or I don't see that in the program. I don't see that. How are you convinced about that? That's one point I don't understand.
Yeah, there are competing visions of the state formation process in Ethiopia.
By the way, Andrew, I know that has been there. even when TPLF was in power, there is this unitarist. There are people with unitarist mentality. They don't support any organizations with ethnic organizations, ethnic political parties, and they oppose the country being federalized with ethnic and the ethno-linguistic or nationalist kind of federalism. There is this competing. Yes, I agree. But how did we make the group in power like that, while its program is different and the whole
thing? I think that these questions of the state formation process in Ethiopia deeply shape the politics of Ethiopia today, including the Prosperity Party and including Abiy's vision of the country. Those people should rightly be allowed to speak for themselves and articulate the Ethiopia that they want. What doesn't seem to be clear is that the current ruling party is creating genuine room for the full participation of leadership and communities in Ethiopia that want to express their differing visions of how Ethiopia was formed and of Ethiopia's future, and to enter into a real dialogue in which genuine diversity of perspective and real disagreement is possible. And until that kind of open space of genuine dialogue where real disagreement can happen without you being afraid of going to jail or losing your job or having your family get harassed or dying, until that's in place, then we're still living in the shadow of an authoritarian Ethiopia that's being imposed from above rather than emerging from the free responsibility and collective agency of the people. And when I say a unitarist Ethiopia, I'm talking about that imposed top-down Ethiopia that isn't emerging from the grassroots where genuine dialogue is taking place, unafraid of disagreement, unafraid of real diversity, and a shared commitment to seeking a mutual well-being within the rule of law.
Yeah, my point, just to make it clear, I am not coming from point of whether this is dictatorship or democracy, or definitely EPRDF in power. There was no question of unitary and federal state. It's federal state, and
right.
There is no, but it was dictatorship
for sure.
This government inherited EPRDF. It's EPRDF to us. Some call them. It's federalist. I mean, but some have come up with a narrative. This is unitarist, and that one is federalist. I don't understand. I don't agree on my part. I didn't see that. Maybe there is intention they didn't disclose yet.
Sure.
Or I don't know. But I don't have evidence to call it. But I know that I thought they framed it for political purpose. That's how I understand it. Anyways.
I think we're seeing a genuine culture war in Ethiopia that's being reflected in the hot war that's taking place on the ground. And that culture war is about what Ethiopia means, how it was formed, and where it's going. And certainly one of the fronts in that culture war is the unitarist vision of Ethiopia, in which Ethiopia is one thing, in which expressing the diversity of Ethiopia's faith traditions, the diversity of Ethiopia's languages, the diversity of Ethiopia's cultural expressions is seen as threatening and competitive with that historic monolithic Ethiopia.
I agree, and it's difficult for them to do that. If I know there is a lot of need to do that, there are ambition to do that. I don't think that ambition can be realized.
That will be the country.
Yeah. Anyways, let me go to the other one. But we have already touched on this. But from your article, you quoted Solomon Dereso, former chairman of Africa Union Commission on Human Rights and People Rights, which he mentions Ethiopia's government have used as a means of maintaining power, and it has become weird into the mindset and institutional tradition of Ethiopian state. That means no change of time condition has been able to change it. I think that's what we have said already about the oppressor. The oppressed become oppressor and do the same, continue the same way of oppressing.
Yeah.
Instead of looking at something, doing the right thing or something different.
Right.
The oppressed thinks that what oppressor is doing is right, or thinking that the oppressor is powerful or more sophisticated, that it oppressed you this way.
Right.
And when you get a chance, when you overthrow the oppressor, all you know what government does is what the oppressor does. And you've been practicing that among yourselves as oppressed when you fight the oppressor.
Yeah.
And when you come to power, you continue doing the same thing.
Yeah.
EPRDF came to power, but continued the same thing Derg has been doing. Prosperity Party came to power. I think it's doing the same thing TPLF has been doing.
Even worse.
Some people believe so. So the question is, how can that be broken?
Yeah.
Unless those people who are like opposing right now do things differently.
Right. Yeah, here's my perspective on this. I've said this before. If you go back and you look at the ancient inscriptions of the Aksumite kings, they claimed to be the son of the war god Maharem. Why is it significant? It's the divinization of violent power as the heart of state formation. The king embodies the state, and the king claims to be authorized by a violent divine power to hold the state together and to expand it. In other words, it's the worship of power at the heart of the state. I think for this cycle of oppression, of dictatorship, of war, of mass-produced poverty and trauma to be broken, the worship of power has to be broken. And that means that we have to rediscover the commitment to responsibility. Responsibility doesn't say, what can I achieve to expand my influence? It says, how am I accountable to truthfulness, to care for the most vulnerable, to the mutual well-being of diverse people, to tell the truth and to be accountable for the mistakes that I have made. Until we see responsibility take a higher priority than power in the formation of Ethiopian society, we will see this cycle again and again and again. And for hundreds of years in Ethiopia, it has been one group achieves power, the people who are around them benefit, other people experience suffering, resentment boils up, there's a revolt, war happens, crops are ruined, people starve, people are murdered, resentment boils, and then it repeats itself. We need to critique the worship of power and rediscover moral responsibility. Now, Nagasa, this is the responsibility, this task of surrendering the worship of power and being claimed by the call of responsibility is the vocation of religious leaders. But today we have seen religious leaders gathering around the center of power. Why? To try to achieve the benefits that can offer to them and their group.
Protection and everything. Yeah.
What we need is critical, independent religious leaders who can remind us of our responsibility to be people of truth and honor. to be people of deep compassion who can grieve for the ungrievable people, who can be people who will work for the common good and share resources so that our dignity and security is not a zero-sum game. This is what pastors and priests, sheikhs and ustazes should be doing in their mosques, their churches, their monasteries. And this is what I'm calling for again and again, is for religious leaders to reclaim their independence from power and to speak from outside it the voice of responsibility of the neighbor, to challenge the othering vision, to say, no, this is not about claiming a monopoly on control for the benefit of our group. We are accountable to care for the well-being of all of the people in the community.
So here are, now we're witnessing Christian leaders are in front of role promoting violence. For example, you see that some sides with the government and come up and bless every violence that government perpetrates, and you find that other leaders, other religious leaders fundraise and buy gun and bullets for rebel groups.
Right.
Every group thinks he is right. If those who fund the rebel group, they think they are doing righteous.
Oh yeah.
Because that side is evil. So they are buying a weapon to maybe OLA or whatever group and supporting that, like buying weapon, fundraising for them is righteous because the other group is evil. Here they are promoting violence. And just as you said, I mean, every group thinks what it's doing is right because, and it only condemns the act by the other group. It doesn't really look at itself.
Yep.
So what does Bible say about this? And what is your understanding in this regard? I mean, is the violence justified in the Bible, or maybe what's your view, and what's Baልንጀራዬ Lansakiya? I think I call you Baልንጀራዬ Lansakiya. Lansa is a friend and some it's not neighbor actually. Allah is neighbor, but Lansa is for any friend. It's a local term in Gujiborana area of Oromo. We have some accent. Yeah, I call it Lansakiya. Okay.
Love it.
What's your view in this regard?
So when you asked me about the war, I said that we need complexity. When we talk about violence in the Bible, we also need to enter into complexity. And that means the humility to say that there are multiple perspectives here that we have to be willing to listen to and that we need to be able to wrestle with. But for me, as a Christian ethicist, I would say that the center of biblical interpretation needs to be the life and practice of Jesus recorded in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And what we see again and again is that Jesus says, love your enemy, bless those who persecute you, and engage in creative nonviolence that breaks out of this mirroring situation where we're all doing the same things over and over again, and point the way into a new future where we can reclaim our creative agency. Now, a lot of people say loving the enemy is weak. But instead, what we see again and again in Jesus is that it is, in fact, an act of higher power to not, oh, you're going to insult me, I insult you back. You are going to threaten me, I threaten you back. You exercise aggression, I exercise aggression back. Instead, it reclaims your own consciousness, your own agency, your own freedom to say, I actually want a better future for you, and I want a better future for me. So I'm not going to mirror you. Instead, I'm going to reimagine what's taking place in this situation to expose the pointlessness of violence. So when Jesus says to turn the other cheek, he's saying expose the shamefulness of violence. When Jesus says, if someone wants to take your coat, give them your shirt as well. He's saying expose the shamefulness and the futility and wastefulness of violence. reclaim your agency. And what I would add to this, Nagasa, is there's a political scientist at Harvard University named Erica Chenoweth, and she has done groundbreaking research on social change and resistance. Her sample size is from 1900 until I think it's like 2016. And she goes across 300 cases and she asks, is violent resistance movements more effective at bringing enduring social change, or are nonviolent social movements more effective at bringing social change? Now, Chenoweth began this research because she thought that nonviolence was weak, utopian, idealistic, unrealistic, and she wanted to disprove it. But the funny thing is that Chenoweth went deep into this massive sample size of data, and her own mind was changed. And she said that non-violent resistance movements, social movements, reform movements is twice as effective as the violent ones, because violent resistance movements so typically result in civil war down the road. Again, because those resentments are boiling underneath, and the mirroring of the violence causes the conflict to escalate. The nonviolent social movements instead open the door to a new future, to new beginnings where people's agency is mutually respected and empowered. What I'm saying is, I think the Bible needs to be interpreted through the lens of the preaching and practice of Jesus. Again and again, Jesus preaches love of the enemy and radical nonviolence through one's own creative agency. And what we see through the most innovative political science today, based in real data across over 100 years, is that this philosophy of nonviolence is actually how we produce real change. And those people who say, no, war is how we get rid of the cancer, let's kill these people and then we can be truly free. This is the old colonial mindset that only allows us to replay the past again and again and again. So I think those who claim some allegiance to Jesus, whether because they're Christians or just because they respect Jesus, are confronted with this challenge. Will I embrace the courage to become a nonviolent person inside myself? And will I participate in the creation of a nonviolent movement in my society? And I guess I just add this: Ethiopia needs a passionately, creatively anti-war movement. We can ask, why is there this systemic, cyclical poverty in Ethiopia that drives people into situations of such deep sorrow, the suffering of mothers and children and families? It's because of the cyclical role of war in destroying the means of a genuinely prosperous society. And so Ethiopian people who want a genuinely prosperous society should be promoting an anti-war vision that says, how do we centralize dialogue? Genuine dialogue. How do we break this mirror where we're innocent, they're evil? If we could get power, everything will be better, and then the cycle replays and replays. So for any of my Christian sisters and brothers listening, for any of my Muslim sisters and brothers listening, for any people who aren't interested in God but that care about human life, that say, let's work on an anti-war movement that centralizes the values of nonviolence, that says the other person has precious value. We can only flourish unless we both flourish. We're better when our mutual agency is joined together in the pursuit of a shared goal, like safety, dignity, food on our table, fighting inflation, creating quality education where our children learn to think critically and creatively and become imaginative agents of change.
Yes.
Let's go there together.
Thank you very much. Let me give you two experiences. Number one, Ethiopians, as a young, I myself, all struggle against tyranny. All I know is maybe violence. I mean, armed struggle, because I have seen the TPLF fought the Derg overthrow the Derg and come to power.
Yep.
With a barrel of the gun.
Yes.
So struggling against dictatorship means for me only violence. That's what I know, and that's what every Ethiopian has seen. And then everybody thinks that unless you fight, you can't win over a government, and all the elections, something is fake. And yes, actually, they were also doing it that way. It was fake. But what's in the people's mentality is power comes out of the barrel of the gun is the principle. And until I read Gandhi and other books in a prison, that was my thought. I mean, but however, after a while, this thinking changed, and especially the Oromo protest showed us that nonviolent movement is a powerful tool. I mean, every Ethiopians have experienced it. But the outcome is it didn't bring people who were in that movement to power.
Yeah.
It was able to topple the previous regime, but it didn't work the way people think. Anyways, still people are thinking the very argument they come up with is in Ethiopia, no government has come to power through election. Therefore, power still comes out of barrel of the gun, and we have to stick to the gun. That is the argument on their side. But still, I insist, not I, but internationally studied resources show us that nonviolence is the most powerful, and it's less costly.
Yeah.
And it can guarantee democracy if well-organized political parties exist, and if people are well aware, if we develop this culture of democracy somehow. On that side. My number two thing from the Bible, if you see Romans number 15, that is one of the things, one of the verses I don't like as a young man.
Sure.
Obey the government.
Right,
and in my childhood mind, I say, how do I obey a government that oppress me? As a high school and as an elementary student, I grew up seeing that my teachers being detained, and everybody, people being detained for being a supporter of OLF here and there. With that mentality, I grew up.
Right.
As a university student, I stopped going to churches. Then I became, organizing protests and thrown to jail. But then I understood that Bible doesn't say obey oppressive government or obey. For me, I understood it. After a while, I understood it that the interpretation is obey the law. You can oppose when government violates the law.
Yeah.
You can make non-violent opposition.
Yeah.
But Bible doesn't allow violence. I mean, I then read in the Bible, and like John the Baptist, he opposed the king. He sacrificed for it.
There are dozens of examples of conscientious resistance in the Bible.
Yes. Like opposing without killing, without going to violence, you can oppose and it's still acceptable in the Bible, I think. Yeah, those are my experiences. If you have a say final word, because we took more time, we may have, if you promise me to give me another chance.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Just say final say. We will have another episode maybe.
I want to have the courage. I want to have the courage to look in the mirror and to see how am I repeating the patterns that have harmed me and projecting them on others. How am I looking at myself and seeing myself as too innocent? How am I looking at the other and seeing them as too evil? How am I closing my ear and refusing to listen, even though I'm so angry that people won't listen to me? How can we become more self-aware and then enter into a spirit of humility that is genuinely willing to share presence with someone who is different than me, that is willing to listen to someone whose perspective I do not share, and to do that with patience, to do that with curiosity, to do that with the presence of peace. I want to become that person. The neighbor love movement starts with me being a presence of peace, of moms and dads creating homes where children can ask questions and can become curious, creative, mature human beings. Each one of us listening to this can become a presence of peace who is strong, who is creative, who is courageous, and who refuses to just mirror the patterns that have led us towards grief, loss, and violence. And so I look in the mirror and say, how can I become a more honest, vulnerable person? And how can each one of you today take a risk of becoming a more honest, vulnerable person that doesn't repeat the cycle, but says, let's start over through genuinely valuing one another and saying, you're not my enemy. You're my neighbor. You matter to me. Let's share a life that is better together.
Thank you very much, Dr. Andrew. I appreciate you being on this show and teach us. God bless. Have a wonderful time.
Galatoma, Xavier Stilin, Shukran. I'm so grateful to be here.
Thank you.